This is a Grove GMK5110 crane. It's made by TWH and it's in 1/50th scale. Now TWH basically set the standard for diecast cranes when they started making these Groves. There are a lot of things on this crane that weren't standard and hadn't been standard for probably 20 years. Really, cranes hadn't changed very much, whether it was from NZG or Conrad or any other manufacturer. They really hadn't changed for a pretty long time, and then TWH came along and this is what they put out, and it basically forced all the other manufacturers to work to this level of detail. You can't buy a WSI crane that's not as good as this, and that's one of the reasons why. The detail on this thing is very, very good. The weight is unbelievable. This thing is so heavy, it's a little bit crazy. But overall, it's a fantastic model. Now, it's the model number is a 5135, right? So Grove, the way they do their model numbers, the 5, the first letter, or the first number rather, is the axle, so it's got 5 axles. I guess that's a 5. And then the next 3 number is the rating of the crane. So 5135, 5 axle, 135 ton crane. That's where you get the number from. Like a 6300 is a 6 axle, 300 ton. And that's basically how you can tell what size the crane is by the model number. Now TWH made a ton of these cranes in different company colors. This one is for Hanchard Cranes. Now, based on the phone number, I would imagine that's probably a European company, but I don't know for sure. I'm not familiar with Hanchard. But I do like the color scheme. I dig the blue and white. It looks really good. I like the wheels. It's a pretty nice combination. You can see the jib there. It's got the hydraulic lever on it. And the different shows will pop up. So like if you want to offset the jib at an angle, you pop that up and you run your rope through there. That's what that's for. Anyway, now the counterweight, I think it's removable, but I think you gotta unscrew it. I don't think you can separate the slabs either. I'm not really sure. I've never taken them off. You can see you got some pretty good detail in there for the upper. This thing is so heavy it's hard to move. Got some nice detail on the warning labels and everything there. The upper, the cab is very well done. It looks really good in there. It's kind of hard to see, but it's pretty darn good looking. Now the outriggers, they're a little stiff once you get them to slide out. Come on. There we go. I don't remember if TWH was the first to do this or not. Really can't remember. But outriggers for the longest time, there we go. You would just be a screw here and you'd have a plastic float on the bottom. And you'd have a screw showing as the outrigger jack. And what they did was they made it so you'd have a solid metal cylinder come out, and it still has a screw in there, but it's got a nice metal cylinder there, so it doesn't look like a toy with, you know, sitting on some screw jacks. And that's really pretty nice. Like I said, I don't know if TWH was the first to do that, but they certainly, I guess, perfected it, I guess you could say. Now you don't get to see any motor detail because it's all covered up there, but it is still looking pretty good. Another thing that's pretty interesting about the crane is, hard to do this without dropping it, underneath. Another, I don't want to call it an innovation, but just a new standard from TWH was the detail underneath with all the gearboxes and transfer cases, and you can see the brake lines and the air tanks and everything. The steering was there, but not all of the extra stuff. And on these Groves, the axles are spring mounted, so you actually have those are kind of stiff, as you can see. You have well, there one, the jib pin. You have a working suspension on the crane. That's just really cool. And like I said, before TWH was doing it, nobody was doing it. It was more or less unheard of. So that's just another one of these little things where TWH did some really great things for just diecast in general. Now the crane does come set up out of the box with a 3-part in the block. You can adjust it, but it is tricky. The becket will come off with a screwdriver, but basically restringing everything is probably going to be a challenge, just because of the way the pins are set up in the shivs up here. But it still looks pretty darn good with the 3-part in it, so we'll just leave it be. Now it does not have a ball for the jib, so if you want to put the jib on, you have to use the block. Which, because you have the becket screwing into the top there, you can run a single part down to it and it'll still work, but it'll just be kind of goofy. One of the neat things about these TWH cranes, you see the holes in the cylinder here. There's another one a little bit lower. It comes with a set of pins, so you can put a pin in the cylinder here, and what it'll do is the inner cylinder will come down to the pin where it runs through the jacket, and that will force the boom up in the air. It'll hold it in a fixed position. So if you want to set it up, with something dangling from the hook, you can do that, and it'll never fall over on you, which is pretty nice. Again, it's another nice thing from TWH that they just did standard. The cab does tilt up, and you can just barely see the cylinder underneath, which again is pretty cool. You do have a set of cheek weights that will just drop right in there. Of course I say that and they won't go. There they are. Let's see if this will spin around. There it is. Yeah, so you have a pretty substantial bit of counterweight there to make it a true 135 ton. Now, you might notice here there's a difference in the number. It's 5110. I believe, again, because it's a European crane, I believe that's metric tons, whereas 110 metric tons is the same as 135 I don't know, US tons or short tons, whatever it's called. I can't think of the actual name for it, but that's the equivalent. That's why the name is, or the model number is different. It's the same crane, just a different measurement, I guess you could say. Anyway, looks pretty darn good when it's all set up. Now the jib is kind of interesting. Like I said, it's got a hydraulic cylinder there, so that's how you do your offset when you want to offset the jib. Some people call this a hydraulic luffer. I don't know what the actual term is, but the idea is the same. It's just that you have more or less an infinitely variable angle that you can get out of it, which is really pretty nice. That's what the reel for is right here on the side of the boom, you have your hydraulic lines that'll feed out the whole way, the whole length of the boom, and they'll feed this cylinder. And that's how that works. Another thing that's cool is you have pins that you can remove here, and you can essentially set like a rooster tip on the end of the boom, and you got all your shivs there for that. You also have a pair of shivs here, so if you wanted to swing like half a jib, you could do that. The only problem is the pin here, where it splits the two pieces, is pressed into place. So if you wanted to like either drill that out or push it out, you can do that, so you can swing half jib, but you gotta basically either save the pin as best you can or make a replacement for it. Otherwise though, it looks pretty good. It's got a pair of long pins that'll just pin right in place, and it looks pretty darn good. Like I said, there's no pill to it, so you'd have to hang the block from the jib, which is a little unfortunate, but it's kind of is what it is. Alright, so it's got 4 intersections, and if you run them all out, because you have a 3-part in it out of the box, you don't have enough rope to actually hit the ground with the block, and that's not unusual. I have no idea how much rope you could run with a 3-part, or rather how many feet of boom you could have with a 3-part and be able to hit the ground. I have no idea, but it's not unusual. And if you look close, you can see like it starts off good here at the top, and then the rope just twists around, twists around, twists around until you get to the block. That's not unusual for a lot of these model cranes. One of the things that you can do to get around that is to basically take this string off the crane entirely. There's a braided fishing line that I've used on a couple different cranes, and it works fantastic. It's called Muskie Master, and it does a really good job. And one of the things to think about, if you're going to restring the crane, figure out how many parts of line you want to run in the block, because you're going to redo it all anyway. You might as well figure out what you want and run the amount of rope that you would need to get it to look the way you want it to look. And suppose you're putting in like a 5-part or 6-part or whatever, the Muskie Master, it's not going to twist around like this does, and it makes it display a lot better. It'll look a lot more realistic, and considering the rest of the crane, that really helps make a nice complete model. So that's just something to think about. Overall though, it's a good looking crane. It displays very well. I like it. I think it's an excellent value. And TWH made so many of these that you can find a pretty good deal on one. It might not be the colors or company that you're looking for, but you can find one if you're just, if the colors don't matter to you, you can find a good deal on it. Anyway, that's about it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. If you'd like to see more of what we have, please subscribe to Maryland Construction Diecast, and thanks for watching.